Insight Quarterly Magazine Issue 39 January to March 2026. Compiled by and editor Justin Phillips. Akanksha Verma transcribed and printed by Mitra Jyothi in collaboration with Radio Udon. Subscription Rs 100 yearly. Mitra Jyothi Digital Library. Mitra Jyothi CA site number P22 31st Main 18th Cross HSR Layout Sector 1 behind Nift College Bangalore 560102. Phone 080-2258762 Email mj.tlibrary@gmail.com. Website www.mitrajyothi.org. Copyright notice. This book is reproduced in accessible format for people with bona fide print disabilities by Mitra Jyothi. CA site no. P22, 18th Cross, 31 St. Main, Sector 1, HSR Layout, behind Nift College, Bengaluru. 560102. Phone no. 2258762 Country code +91 Bengaluru code 080. Email mj.tlibrary@gmail.com. Website www.mitrajyothi.org. This book is created for distribution for the print disabled only and in accordance with the Marrakesh Treaty ratified by India on July 24, 2014 and Section 52(1) ZB of the Copyright Act, 1957. This accessible format production of the original publication is permitted to be used only by persons with print disabilities. Any further reproduction, distribution to any person without a print disability or any commercial use of this book is strictly prohibited and will be subject to legal action. Contents 1. Editorial 2. Out and About 3. The Rise and Fall of the Gulf Rupee when India was central banker to West Asia 4. Kashmir's transport transformation 5. The Noblest of Things 6. The Miraculous Survival of Nader Itrab 7. Mitra Jyothi News January, March 2026 8. Recipe 9. Radio Udon News 1. Editorial. Dear readers, as we cross the threshold of 2026, the global landscape resembles a canvas painted in starkly contrasting strokes. It is a year defined not by a steady, predictable march forward, but by a sharp collision between systemic vulnerabilities and unprecedented frontiers of human capability. For both India and the broader global community, 2026 has emerged as a masterclass in duality, a period where the traditional fault lines of geopolitics and economics threaten stability, even as the horizons of technology and exploration expand at a breathless pace. The repercussions from the unending war, capabilities of AI, impending fears of job loss, all have led to uncertainty in both public and private life. Sometimes, hope isn't a blazing torch, it is just a tiny, steady match struck in the dark. It doesn't show you the entire landscape, but it gives you just enough light to see where to place your very next step. True resilience is rarely loud, it is the quiet capacity to bend without breaking, to adapt when the original plan falls away, and to rewrite the map as you walk. When the horizon feels obscured, remember that clarity doesn't always come before action. Often, clarity is born from action, one small choice at a time. The oak fought the wind and was broken, the willow bent when it must and survived. Robert Jordan. In this edition, we have interesting articles relating to bees, trauma of a girl, Kashmir, and the rupee. If you have articles to share, please send them. Enjoy this edition, and have a fantastic time soaking up the knowledge. Justin Phillips, Editor. 2. Out and About. Age-reversing injection. In a world first, a human has received a cellular reprogramming injection. Biotechnology company Life Biosciences announced yesterday the experimental treatment will be tested in close to 20 patients with glaucoma or non-arthritic anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. The gene therapy involves returning cells to their younger states so they can become resilient to disease, but not all the way to their newborn stem cell state. The company has successfully reversed tissue aging in monkeys and mice using this method, including healing age-related blindness. However, researchers are concerned about the possibility of side effects in humans, as 2 of the 4 proteins involved in the process have the potential to divide uncontrollably in animal trials. Some mice developed tumors. For the first ever human trial, researchers are injecting the therapy into a glaucoma patient's eye and will monitor the intervention for 6 months. Ultimately, researchers hope to expand interventions into liver and muscle cells, with Jeff Bezos and Sam Altman backing some of Life Biosciences' competitors. Space. The crew of Artemis Roman 2 broke an Apollo record. When the crewed Artemis Roman 2 mission swung around the far side of the moon, astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen reached a maximum distance of 252,757 miles, 406,773 km from Earth. This officially broke the 54-year-old record set by Apollo 13 in 1970 for the farthest humans have ever traveled into deep space. For centuries, historians debated what caused the sudden, near-simultaneous deaths of the prominent Italian Renaissance brothers, Giovanni and Grazia de' Medici, in 1562. Rumors at the time whispered of a tragic fratricidal sword fight followed by a grief-stricken murder. However, scientists performing advanced ancient DNA analysis on their exhumed bones finally disproved the centuries-old gossip. Both brothers actually had severe, biologically identical strains of malaria when they died. Tech. A spray-on powder that stops severe bleeding in 1 second. Biomedical engineers at KAIST developed a revolutionary spray-on powder designed to combat life-threatening, catastrophic hemorrhages. The moment the powder makes contact with moisture in a severe wound, it undergoes an instant phase transition, forming a tightly sealed, durable gel that completely halts arterial bleeding in roughly 1 second. Architecture. The Sagrada Familia finally built its tallest tower exactly 100 years after the tragic death of its master architect, Antoni Gaudí. The central tower of Jesus Christ at the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona was consecrated and opened. Rising to its final intended height, it officially cemented the historic structure as the tallest church building anywhere on Earth. Physicists recently succeeded in making a clock tick using the state transitions of an atomic nucleus rather than the vibrations of electrons. This nuclear clock is projected to lose less than 1 single second every billions of years, promising a scale of timekeeping precision never before seen in human history. Space exploration. NASA's Psyche pulls off a perfect planetary slingshot. NASA's Psyche spacecraft successfully used Mars as a gravity assist slingshot, passing within 2,864 miles, 4,609 km, of the red planet. The spacecraft pulled off a highly technical maneuver. It stole a fraction of Mars's orbital energy to increase its own speed by 1,000 miles per hour and tilted its orbital plane by exactly 1 degree, all without firing a single onboard thruster. This free boost successfully keeps Psyche on course for its 2029 arrival at a massive, metal-rich asteroid of the same name, which scientists believe could be the exposed iron core of an ancient, dead planet. Archaeology. The mummy with a golden tongue and a dash of Homer. During excavations at the ancient site of Al-Nasser in Egypt, archaeologists unearthed a series of Roman period tombs containing remarkably unique mummies. Several were fitted with tongues made of solid gold foil, an ancient ritual practice meant to allow the deceased to speak eloquently to Osiris, the god of the underworld. Even more surprising, stuffed inside one of the mummy's wrappings was a well-preserved papyrus fragment containing lines of ancient Greek poetry straight out of Homer's Iliad, specifically the famous Catalogue of Ships. Robotics. The UK pulls off a 1,500-mile remote surgery. In a groundbreaking moment for telemedicine, surgeons successfully conducted a complex, long-distance robotic-assisted surgery over a distance of 1,500 miles, 2,400 km. The operating surgeon was physically located in the United Kingdom, while the patient was lying on an operating table in Gibraltar. The procedure relied on advanced ultra-low latency fiber networks and precise robotic arms, proving that critical specialized surgeries can now be beamed to remote or isolated locations globally with near zero lag. Paleontology. Even the mammal ancestors laid eggs. The evolutionary bridge between reptiles and modern mammals has always been a bit murky, but a stunning discovery has cleared things up. Paleontologists identified and described the first ever fossilized embryo of Lystrosaurus, a tusked, pig-sized synapsid, a mammal ancestor that roamed the Earth over 250 million years ago. Finding the delicate skeleton preserved inside a fossilized shell structure definitively confirms what scientists long suspected but couldn't prove. The immediate precursors to modern mammals were still firmly egg layers. If you're looking for an excuse to ditch your office chair, a large-scale health study published in PLOS One found that while regular physical activity drops your risk of dementia by 25%, sitting continuously for more than 8 hours a day actively spikes your risk by 27%, effectively cancelling out most of the benefits of a standard workout. Lost Byzantine city. Egyptian officials announced the discovery of a Byzantine-era city in the country's western desert on Saturday. The well-preserved city is located in the Dakhla Oasis and reveals scenes of daily life. The city was organized by north-south and east-west streets, forming public squares. Many of the houses had vaulted roofs and reception halls, with researchers also uncovering bread ovens, kitchens, and stone grinding tools. Overlooking the city was a basilica-style church, alongside 2 watchtowers to protect the town. There was also a building fortified with thick defensive walls. The city dates back to the 4th century, with gold coins discovered from the reign of Roman Emperor Constantius Roman II. Bronze coins were also found showcasing Byzantine emperors, Latin phrases, and Christian symbols. Separately, Egypt revealed the discovery of 18 additional tombs at Marina El Alamein, an archaeological site 62 miles west of Alexandria. 3. The rise and fall of the Gulf rupee. When India was central banker to West Asia, long before the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman boasted some of the world's strongest independent currencies, their markets echoed with a familiar name, the rupee. For centuries, the economic lifeblood of the Persian Gulf region was tightly bound to the Indian subcontinent. The culmination of this shared history was a fascinating, short-lived monetary experiment known as the Gulf rupee or the external rupee, issued by the Government of India and the Reserve Bank of India (RBI) between 1959 and 1966. This unique currency represents a bygone era of Indian economic hegemony in West Asia. 1. The historical prelude. a shared currency. The story of the Gulf rupee does not begin in 1959, but centuries earlier through maritime trade. The house carrying pearls, dates, and spices sailed between the ports of the Persian Gulf and coastal hubs like Bombay, Cochin, and Calicut. Because India was the economic giant of the region, the silver Indian rupee naturally became the preferred medium of exchange across the Arabian Peninsula. When the British Empire established protectorates over the sovereign emirates on the eastern Arabian Peninsula, collectively known as the Trucial States, alongside the Sultanates of Muscat and Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, they chose not to introduce a new currency. Instead, they formalized existing custom. The administration of these territories was heavily managed via the British Raj in India, making the standard Indian rupee the official legal tender of the Gulf. By the mid-20th century, the system was mutually beneficial. For the Gulf states, it provided a stable, widely respected currency backed by a large economy. For the Reserve Bank of India, the Gulf states purchased these rupees using British pounds sterling. The RBI held these sterling reserves, ensuring the arrangement did not strain India's domestic wealth. 2. The gold smuggling crisis of the 1950s. Following India's independence in 1947, this seamless monetary union hit a massive snag, driven by a deep-rooted cultural phenomenon: India's voracious appetite for gold. While India was experiencing severe domestic restrictions on foreign exchange and gold imports to protect its newly independent economy, the free market ports of the Gulf were swimming in gold, largely sourced from South Africa. This mismatch birthed a massive, highly sophisticated smuggling pipeline. The mechanics of the operation were simple yet devastating to the Indian economy. 1. Smugglers sent couriers from the Gulf to India packed with physical gold bars. 2. In India, the gold was sold on the black market for standard Indian rupees at a massive premium. 3. The couriers returned to the Gulf with wads of regular Indian currency. 4. Because Indian rupees were legal tender in the Gulf, local banks or merchants accepted them and repatriated them back to the RBI in Bombay via official channels, demanding conversion into valuable pounds sterling. By 1957-1958, gold smuggling had reached staggering heights. A 1959 RBI report estimated that over $92 million worth of gold had been illegally brought into the country. The core of the problem was that the RBI had plenty of sterling reserves backing the rupees officially bought by Gulf governments. However, it had zero reserves allocated for the millions of smuggled rupees returning from the cash-heavy parallel economy. This loophole was systematically draining India's official foreign exchange reserves. 3. 1959. Birth of the external Gulf rupee. To stem the bleeding, the Indian Finance Minister Morarji Desai and RBI Governor H.V.R. Iyengar, in close consultation with the Bank of England and Gulf rulers, engineered a swift legislative solution. On May 1, 1959, the Indian Parliament passed the Reserve Bank of India Amendment Act. The law authorized the creation of a distinct currency called the external rupee, popularly known as the Gulf rupee. The plan required absolute secrecy and speed to prevent smugglers from dumping their cash holdings. The RBI gave Gulf residents a strict 6-week window from May 11 to June 21, 1959, to exchange their regular Indian currency for the new Gulf rupee notes. After the deadline, standard Indian banknotes were entirely demonetized outside of India. Design and aesthetics. The new Gulf rupees were pegged at exact par value with the domestic Indian rupee ratio, but they looked visibly different to ensure they could never be spent inside India. Color variations. Whilst standard Indian banknotes of the era featured familiar hues, the Gulf variants used bold, alternate colorways. The 1 rupee note issued by the government and the 10 rupee note issued by the RBI were printed in a distinct red. The 5 rupee note was orange, and the 100 rupee note was green. Unique identification. The serial numbers on these notes all featured a special Z prefix, for example, to the promised clause. Unlike domestic notes that promised payment at any office of issue, the Gulf rupee specified that it was payable specifically at the office of issue at Bombay. The Hajj notes parallel. Concurrently, the RBI noticed that Indian Muslims undertaking the annual Hajj pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia were carrying vast amounts of cash, which was also being intercepted by smugglers. To plug this leak, the RBI introduced separate blue 10 rupee and red 100 rupee Hajj notes featuring the prefix HA for the exclusive use of pilgrims. 4. The 1966 devaluation and collapse. The Gulf rupee achieved its primary objective. It broke the link between India's domestic currency supply and the West Asian gold trade. However, the currency's fate was ultimately tied to the health of the Indian economy. By the mid-1960s, India was facing extreme economic strain due to consecutive wars with China 1962 and Pakistan 1965, severe droughts, and a crippling trade deficit. On June 6, 1966, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government took the drastic step of devaluing the Indian rupee by 57% to stabilize the economy. causing the exchange rate to plummet from 4.76 to 7.50 against the US dollar. Because the Gulf rupee was directly pegged to the Indian rupee, its purchasing power in West Asia evaporated overnight. For Gulf nations, which were on the cusp of an historic, oil-driven economic boom, tying their financial fortunes to a struggling South Asian economy no longer made sense. The shockwaves of the devaluation shattered the currency union instantly. Kuwait had already anticipated these issues, having successfully established its own currency, the Kuwaiti dinar, in 1961. Bahrain quickly dropped the rupee in favor of the Bahraini dinar in 1965 at an exchange rate of 1 dinar equals 10 rupees. Qatar and the Trucial states initially panicked and adopted the Saudi Riyal as an emergency measure before creating the unified Qatar and Dubai Riyal. Abu Dhabi temporarily used the Bahraini dinar. Oman held out the longest, continuing to use the old pre-devaluation Gulf rupee peg backed by its own government reserves until 1970, when it finally introduced the Omani Riyal. 5. The legacy of the Gulf rupee. By the early 1970s, the Gulf rupee was entirely phased out of circulation, ending a multi-century chapter where Indian currency served as the bedrock of West Asian commerce. Today, the legacy of this economic marriage survives in subtle linguistic and cultural cues. For instance, among older generations and South Asian diaspora communities in the UAE and Qatar, slang terms like rubiya or anna are still occasionally used when referring to money or small change. For numismatists and currency historians, the Gulf and Hajj rupees are considered holy grails because they were issued for a limited time in a restricted geographical area. Surviving notes with the distinct Z or HA prefixes command massive sums at global auction houses, sometimes fetching tens of thousands of dollars. They serve as a fascinating historical testament to a time when India printed the money that built the modern Gulf. Justin. 4. Kashmir's transport transformation. Kashmir is the crown of India, paradise on earth. The valley of Kashmir is famously called paradise on earth for its lush green fields, snow-capped mountains, and the iconic Dal and Narmada lakes. Hill stations. Places like Gulmarg Ski Resort, Pahalgam, and Sonmarg attract trekkers, hikers, and nature lovers. Winter sports. Gulmarg is one of India's major ski destinations, while the mountains offer year-round trekking and mountaineering opportunities. Kashmir is changing in recent times. Recognizing the value of economic activity, the government has set the goal of transforming Kashmir into an accessible place to work, travel, and in the process, integrate the region to the rest of India. The railway network in Kashmir has undergone a huge transformation. The long-awaited Udhampur-Srinagar rail link (USPIL) project is fully completed and operational, establishing a permanent, all-weather rail connection between the Kashmir Valley and the rest of the Indian rail grid. Direct train services including the high-speed Vande Bharat Express run seamlessly from Jammu and Katra directly into Srinagar and Baramulla. The core network USPIL project. The 324 km Jammu-Baramulla mainline is a massive engineering feat designed to conquer the fragile and steep Himalayan terrain. It is divided into distinct operational sections that now form a single continuous corridor. Jammu to Udhampur, 53 km. The initial leg, open since 2004. Udhampur to Katra, 25 km. Connecting the rail network to the base of the Vaishno Devi pilgrimage. Katra to Banipal, 111 km. The final, most challenging leg through the Pir Panjal range. It features 35 tunnels and 62 bridges. Banipal to Baramulla, 135 km. The section running right through the heart of the Kashmir Valley, covering key hubs like Kazigund, Anantnag, Srinagar, and Sopore. Architectural and engineering marvels. Building a railway line in this region required groundbreaking engineering solutions to handle high seismic activity, intense wind speeds, and extreme winter temperatures. The Chenab Rail Bridge, spanning the Chenab River at a staggering height of 359 meters, over 1,170 feet above the riverbed. This is the world's highest railway arch bridge, surpassing the height of the Eiffel Tower by 35 meters. The Angikard Bridge, Indian Railway's first major cable-stayed rail bridge, safely anchored across a deep, complex geological gorge. India's longest transportation tunnel. The network includes Tunnel T49, stretching an impressive 12.77 kilometers through the mountain ranges of the Ramban district. Weatherproof fleet. The Vande Bharat train sets deployed on this route are specially winterized to operate smoothly in temperatures that drop very low. While this newly completed rail network provides an all-weather backbone for the region, it works hand in hand with Kashmir's rapidly evolving road network, which handles the vital, last-mile connectivity to the valley's more remote towns and border areas. Just as the railways have conquered the terrain with megatunnels and bridges, the highway system is undergoing a parallel transformation, most notably through the multi-lane expansion of the NH44 Jammu-Srinagar highway and the construction of the Zagila and Zedmore tunnels. Together, these rail and road corridors are shifting Kashmir away from its historic seasonal isolation, creating a highly integrated transport web that links deep mountain valleys directly to the rest of the country. The massive infrastructure project to build all-weather roads in Kashmir using strategic tunnels is transforming travel across the region. Historically, heavy winter snowfall, avalanches, and landslides have completely isolated parts of Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh for up to 6 months a year. To solve this, India has been constructing a series of megatunnels. The network effectively bypasses treacherous, high-altitude mountain passes, turning perilous seasonal routes into reliable, year-round highways. 1. The Kashmir to Ladakh Lifeline NH1. The most high-profile all-weather project is on National Highway 1 NH1, which connects Srinagar to Leh. It relies on a twin-tunnel system to bypass the notorious, avalanche-prone Zagila Pass. The Zagila Tunnel. This is the crown jewel of the project. It is a 13.14 km long horseshoe-shaped, single-tube, two-lane tunnel built at a staggering altitude of 11,578 feet. Once fully open to traffic, it will be Asia's longest bi-directional high-altitude tunnel. It slashes travel time across the pass from 3 hours to just 20 minutes, keeping the connection between the Kashmir Valley and Ladakh open even in peak winter. The Zedmore Tunnel, located just before the Zagila Tunnel, near Sonamarg. This 6.5 km long tunnel bypasses a highly dangerous, Z-shaped avalanche corridor. It ensures that the tourist hub of Sonamarg remains accessible all winter. 2. The Jammu to Srinagar Lifeline NH44, the main highway linking Kashmir to the rest of India. NH44, used to close constantly due to landslides in the winter. A chain of massive tunnels now keeps this corridor open. Dr. Syama Prasad Mukherjee Tunnel, Chenani Ashri, at 9.2 km. This is one of India's longest fully operational road tunnels. It bypasses snowbound upper stretches, reducing the distance between Jammu and Srinagar by 30 km. Banipal Kazigund Road Tunnel, a 8.45 km twin-tube tunnel that bypasses the classic Jawahar Tunnel area. It sits at a lower altitude, meaning it completely avoids the heaviest snow zones and prevents traffic halts during blizzards. Engineering under extreme conditions. Building these tunnels in the Greater Himalayas is considered an engineering marvel due to 3 primary challenges. 1. Fragile geology. The Himalayas are young, seismically active, and structurally unstable. Engineers use the new Austrian tunneling method, NATM, a technique where the rock is excavated sequentially and immediately supported with sprayed concrete, shotcrete, and rock bolts. This allows the mountain's natural rock ring to support its own weight rather than relying solely on heavy concrete walls. 2. Freezing temperatures. Work sites regularly hit temperatures between to during the winter, which freezes equipment and complicates concrete setting. 3. Smart safety infrastructure. Because these tunnels are long and enclosed, they are built as smart tunnels. They are equipped with automated semi-transverse ventilation systems to clear exhaust, continuous SCADA-based CCTV monitoring, emergency laybys, and specialized high-altitude firefighting gear. Strategic and civilian impact. Beyond boosting year-round tourism and trade for locals, these all-weather roads have immense military importance. They allow the continuous, year-round movement of troops, heavy machines, and essential supplies to the border frontiers without relying on seasonal stockpiling. By conquering the formidable geography of the Greater Himalayas, India has done more than just build bridges and tunnels. It has forged a permanent, unbreakable link to its northernmost region, ensuring that the crown of India shines brighter, stands more resilient, and remains deeply connected to the pulse of the entire nation. Ranjit. 5. The noblest of things. I told my wife today, whilst training the last of the 4 gallons of honey they left behind, that someday, maybe next spring, we should put more bees in those boxes down by the road. But they would not be the same bees I came to know over the last year. They were our first hive. Last spring, my neighbor Jacob Dvorak, a strapping Czech farmer, called me at 10 o'clock one night. His son, Jacob Jr., had spotted a swarm of bees earlier in the day 10 miles away, while ploughing a field for a man. We drove over, pitch black outside, and found the swarm, about the size of a basketball, hanging from a mesquite limb just the other side of a barbed wire fence. The 3 of us held the barbed wire open for one another, crawled in, and stood in the waist-high Johnson grass along the dirt road, me holding the flashlight. The old man cut a cedar branch, and pulled a jar of water out of the back pocket of his overalls, then wet the cedar fronds, and gently sprinkled the swarm to keep them from flying away. Bees, when they swarm, are not particularly interested in stinging you, but in finding a new home. These had stopped on the tree for the night, to rest and prepare to resume their search at daylight. The swarm now sufficiently wet, Jacob gingerly slipped a gunny sack over the bees, and closed the mouth around the tree limb. With a saw, Jacob Jr. began taking the branch off. In the beam of the flashlight, I watched the bees that never quite made it into the sack begin to seek out their mates inside. Finding only Jacob's thick farmer fingers iron gripping the sack around the branch, the outliers began stinging the old man repeatedly. He didn't flinch, knowing that if he weakened his grip we'd lose everything. Hurry up, he said calmly to his son, as the bees ferociously attacked his clenched hands. Jacob Jr. sawed faster, and when the branch came loose the old man carried the sack full of bees, the sawn branch sticking out the end, over to the truck, where he tied it up with a piece of string. Then we drove home. No gloves, bee suits, face veils, or discussion of the distinct possibility they could have been Africanized bees, the killer bees, which have made it up to this area. Looking back, I realized that I was in the presence of bee men that night, farmers rich in finer forms of pain, with memories of brothers and friends pinned under tractors, or burned alive using gasoline in foolish ways, or slaughtered in crashes en route to town or to the auction barn with a trailer full of cattle. Bee stings were nothing. I headlights on the truck, we brushed the bees into a white, wooden hive box by my house along County Road 3304, near Penelope, Texas. A couple of days later, I passed the box on the way to the post office and pulled off to watch a strange sight. Bees in the air everywhere. Jacob Jr. happened by, and he, too, pulled over to watch. The bees were swarming again. Bees get a mind to swarm, they just want to swarm, he said. The next day, I opened the hive and there were no bees. We tried again a couple of weeks later, taking a small swarm the size of a softball off some wood pallets behind a house being built over on the asphalt road. FM 2214. FM stands for Farm to Market Road. They crisscross the rural parts of Texas. The lady who was having the house built had called Jacob in a panic, like most people do when they spot a swarm. Most people who live in the country know the value of bees, and are hesitant to needlessly shoot them with a can of wasp killer, the spray that squirts out lethal dope from a safe 20 feet away. People call around to find a bee man, and Jacob was pretty much it around here. Jacob came by and picked me up, and we went over and settled the bees down with a spritz of water from a spray bottle, then shoveled them into a hive box. A few days later, they, too, abandoned the hive along County Road 3304, and I was again without bees. I needed bees without a mind to swarm, so I called Claude Lester. Claude is the bee man's bee man, not a pleasure bee man, but a commercial beekeeper who sells bees and equipment out of his garage down south of Waco. I have no idea how old he is, but he seems ancient, a thin man with double hearing aids and a passion for bees. Many men his age are waiting for death in nursing homes, but Claude seems to me a man who might just live forever. Back behind his house is a big shed, and around that a bee yard, stacked high with hundreds of hives and millions of bees. I was a little hesitant to walk back there at first, but followed Claude, who just casually walked into the haze of bees in his shirt sleeves. The bees he sells are not wild, but Italian bees, bred for honey production, with a mild temperament. This, at first, you must take on faith. It is not to say Italian bees won't sting you, it just takes them a little longer to get mad. According to C.P. Dadant's seminal Beekeeper's Manual, first published in 1917, beekeeping is ancient, recorded in the Vedas of India, the Quran, and the Bible. Pliny and Aristotle mentioned it. Dadant says that honey was the universal sweet, until Alexander the Great brought sugarcane back from an expedition in Asia. The candles burning before strange gods in the temples of antiquity were the products of the bees' tireless efforts. Consider the great literature written in the darkness of history by the light of beeswax candles. The countenance of Cleopatra was made more radiant by face creams made of beeswax. To the bee, the wax is just the utilitarian stuff with which it builds its home. Honey is the food the bee lays by for the winter, when no flowers bloom. Honey and beeswax, Jonathan Swift said, are the two noblest of things, which are sweetness and light. From the burning bush of Exodus, God himself promised to deliver Moses and his people to a land flowing with milk and honey. According to farmers.gov, honeybees alone pollinate 80% of all flowering plants, including more than 130 types of fruits and vegetables. Apple, pear and orange groves pay beekeepers to bring in semi-trailer loads of beehives for this purpose. As the bee gathers nectar from the flower, she inadvertently deposits it on other flowers. I do not use the word she accidentally. All worker bees are female, and live to serve the queen. The queen lives to lay eggs, the only bee in the hive of say, 80,000, who does so. A handful of males, drones, are tolerated long enough to mate with the queen. Come winter, the males are driven out and die in the cold, having become needless expenditures of winter's precious food stores. Such is the efficient justice within the hive. A bee with no further purpose receives no quarter. In the summer, the worker bee lives less than 6 weeks, literally wearing herself out from work. Some workers are assigned to guard the entrance of the hive from predators, such as ants or other bees, who seek to rob the honey. In the heat of summer, some bees stand at the entrance and buzz their wings, transferring air from bee to bee all the way inside the hive, fanning the interior to keep it cool, lest the beeswax combs melt. Other bees feed the queen. Some build the comb, a perfect hexagon. Some seal the comb when it is filled with honey. Others go out and gather nectar, seeking flowers up to 12 miles away and returning, somehow, to find the tiny hive entrance. It is a perfect division of labor, utter cooperation, tireless sacrifice, not for the life of any one bee save the queen, but for the ongoing survival of the colony at large. I imagine each bee knows, somehow, that its time on earth earth is short. Maybe it is the honor of those ancestors who did likewise, and the hope of the descendants that will follow, that motivates the individual bee to persevere until she drops lifeless from the air into the meadow, laden with nectar which she will never deliver. For those bees charged with gathering nectar, life will be a time hard and brief. But oh, what an existence, possessing the ability to fly over field and farm, to look down on the laziness of the hardest working man and show him his vanity and weakness, to spend dawn to dusk among the flowers man never notices, blooms he calls weeds, among the yellow-flowered mesquite trees, the paler yellow cotton blooms, the clovers white and yellow, rich and sticky. The pedigree of honey does not concern the bee. A clover, any time, to him, is aristocracy, wrote Emily Dickinson. She was half right. Odd she never knew that the bees she noted were all girls. But back to Claude, bee man of all bee men. He sold me 5 frames dripping with bees and honey, and a queen, dotted with a speck of blue paint to identify her. I installed them, and lo and behold, they stayed. I got the white bee-proof suit, the heavy gloves up to the elbow, the veil, and was in the bee business, down by County Road 3304. The first time I went to inspect the bees, I was nervous. I took the smoker, a small canister filled with smouldering burlap and rotten wood, which puffs smoke into the hive. The smoke makes the bees think that a fire is threatening them, and they set about devouring honey as fast as they can, believing they are going to have to fly away and establish a new hive. The smoke distracts them, so that, up to a point, they focus on survival instead of on stinging you. It is a trick, and the act always made me feel a little bad, interrupting their sense of order, frightening them. But I was more frightened than they, having heard that if you panic in the face of thousands of stinging insects, they will smell your fear or pheromones or whatever and attack you even more fiercely. In my head, a mantra of "stay cool, don't panic" was running as I used the special flat knife to crack open the lid and reach into the basket of adders. You see, a beehive is not just a collection of boxes stacked on top of one another. The boxes are all stuck together by a substance the bees gather from trees called propolis, a sticky, sap-like glue. They cork every crack and seam, removing the lid, breaking apart the boxes, or pulling out the frames inside, upon which the bees build their combs and store their honey, requires breaking the seal of propolis at every turn. This is how the bees keep out ants, wind, cold, and blowing rain, a society sealed from within. My hive had 4 boxes, 2 on top called supers, which hold only honey and from which the queen is excluded by a metal screen with holes large enough for the workers to enter but not the much larger queen. The bottom 2 boxes are the actual hive, where the queen and her loyal subjects live, and the young are reared. To allow the queen up into the supers would mean larvae laid among the chambers of pure honey, the 2 of which could not be separated when it comes time to take the honey. I pried all the boxes apart until I reached the bottom ones, the hive proper, puffing smoke as I went, angering more bees as I went. By the time I lifted the frame containing the queen, my hands were black with crawling bees, stinging at my gloves, flying straight at my face, hitting my veil head on. The smoke only does so much. A bee dies when it stings, sacrificing itself to protect the hive. Many bees died that day, and on subsequent days, fruitlessly placing their stingers in my canvas gloves. There was no approaching fire, no need to flee, there was no need to die. There was, however, a thief, me. A few days ago, I went down and robbed the bees of their fall honey, taking 1 super and leaving 1 for them to eat during the winter. Some bee men take both supers and feed their bees sugar water during the long winter, but something about that seemed so unfair that I never did it. I figured they were entitled to half their provisions, for which they had worked so hard. I commented to my wife how few bees had been in the supers when I opened the boxes, and I laid that fact to my good bee management and to opening the hive in early morning, when, logically, most of the bees would be outside gathering honey rather than inside the hive waiting to sting me. Such is the reason bee men don't rob when it's cloudy, for fear too many bees have stayed home in the hive, unwilling to risk being caught 12 miles from the hive in a rainstorm. But, as I learned yesterday, when I went to replace the frames in the top super, good management was not the case for not having many bees present to bother me. Opening up the hive itself, down in the lower 2 boxes, I found strange spider webs covering everything, the unmistakable sign of wax moths. This is the bee's most feared enemy. A wax moth is just that, a moth, to my knowledge serving no purpose on earth besides eating your sweaters and destroying bees and their hives. Frantically, I pulled out frame after frame, killing wasps that had already invaded to help themselves to the honey, and ants, which trailed among the frames. It was the end of my colony, the gang under my watch, my sturdy and noble workers living to serve their queen, and doing so in spite of me, the robber of honey, the threat greater than fire. I loved these bees, and I believe they were worthy of that. After much hesitation, I took most of the honey-filled frames from the other super, the ones the bees would have used to survive the winter, and my wife and I extracted the honey. It took a couple more hours, and was sweet as only honey can be, and summer as only emptiness can be. I left a couple of frames of honey in the box, letting the few remaining bees eat their fill as their days ran out. I found the body of the queen, the blue spot still on her back. The queen, the only source of new eggs, had died. For whatever reason, the moths had gained entry, and the colony was doomed by attrition. As they died off, there were no fresh replacements, nobody to succeed them, and they just petered out. Bees maintain a handful of larvae intended to serve as backup queens, but clearly, they had not been able to get a succession plan going in time. Bees, it seemed to me, are so meticulous and careful in their actions. Even so, something greater than all their preparations and industry and cleverness had surprised them and cost them everything. For all the richness to be squeezed from knowing of a bee's life, I sometimes think there is even more to be learned from its demise. By their ceaseless efforts during the summer, they produced a full store of honey for the winter. But as fall approaches now, down by County Road 3304 near Penelope, Texas, there will be no one left to taste the sweetness of their labor save me and my wife, and the few friends we can think of who, around Christmas, would appreciate the rare taste of those bees' honey, while never knowing it was the last batch that noble colony would ever make. You just can't tell people something like that. David Fowler raised bees and native plants on a ranch in central Texas. He now lives and writes in Jackson, Mississippi, and is legally blind. 6. The Miraculous Survival of Nada Itrab. On 27 August 2013, a tall, spirited 9-year-old girl with long, well-brushed hair boarded an overnight coach in Barcelona. Nada Itrab was bright and observant. At school, she regularly came top of her class. Even now, she carried a notebook, eager to record the things she would discover on this trip. She had been given a camera, too, a cheap, lilac-colored digital model which, since she was unused to luxuries, seemed to her like a treasure. In 8 hours, Nada would be at Barajas Airport in the Spanish capital, Madrid. She would take her first flight, heading for Bolivia's largest city, Santa Cruz de la Sierra. To her, the trip was an adventure, like something from the storybooks that she read at her local library in El Hospitalet de Llobregat, a city just south of Barcelona. The daughter of undocumented immigrants from Morocco, Nada had lived there since she was 4. Only one other person was traveling with Nada. Grover Morales was a neighbor with a saintly air. In La Florida, the poor neighborhood in which he and Nada's family lived, Morales made a point of greeting everyone, regardless of race or faith. He read religious books, not just the Christian Bible, but also the Torah and the Quran. He made Nada's family food. He had installed a bath for them with his own hands. For Morales, a Bolivian man in his mid-30s, this was a business and family trip. He was going home to pick up jewelry and bring it back to sell, or so he said. He offered to take Nada as a reward for her excellent schoolwork. They would be back in a week. Her parents signed a notarized document permitting Nada to travel with him. Nada was excited. When she returned for the new school year a few weeks later, she would not have to pretend, as she usually did, that her family had spent the summer at the seaside rather than ecking out their little money at home. She would have a real story to tell, but she was also nervous. She knew things about Morales that others did not. At the cyber cave where her family used the internet, she had found a video of him entering a trance in his place of worship, with his hair whipping across his face as he worked himself up to an ecstatic frenzy. That scared her. As a 9-year-old, she also did not understand the weird, unsettling things he occasionally did when her parents left them alone. Why did he end some rough and tumble games by lying, fully clothed on top of her? But this trip was approved by her parents. Surely, nothing bad would happen. The security camera pictures from Barajas Airport capture the moment that Nada and the white-shirted Morales line up to board the plane. The image of this bright child waiting in her spotted dress at the airport is heartbreaking. The best that can be said about what followed is that she survived. That alone is a triumph, a tribute to Nada, along with a small number of others who came to her rescue. Nada is now 21, a serious, hard-working law student at Barcelona University. As she grew up, she found very few people were interested in asking her what happened after she stepped into that aircraft. It is only in recent years that she herself has begun to find out the full details of a 9-month-long ordeal that she tried very hard to forget. It is a process she has chosen to undertake publicly. In some ways, the hours we have spent talking over the past few months form part of the process of recovery, but they also reflect Nada's own ambition to confront the stigma and campaign against the global trafficking of children. I don't want to just be the girl who got kidnapped, she told me, staring into the camera at the immigration desk at the airport in Santa Cruz. Nada flashed a tired smile, her hair ragged from the trip. On the airport bus into the city, she stared out of the window. In Spain, Nada and her parents lived in a neighborhood that was a byword for poverty, crime, drugs and despair. But, to Nada, Santa Cruz seemed even grubbier, shabbier, noisier. Children her age sold wares on the roadside. As they waited for a second bus to Morales' hometown of Cochabamba, they argued about her passport. Morales had kept hold of it. Now he claimed it was lost, and blamed her. They would have to stay longer while he got her a new one, he said. It was then that Nada realized she had been tricked. She wept loudly and banged at the bus window, crying for her mother. Morales had claimed to be wealthy, but his mother's home outside Cochabamba was a dump. They spoke Quechua, an indigenous language that Nada didn't understand. Morales and Nada moved into a ramshackle two-story brick building on a dirt road in Cochabamba that belonged to his absent brother Fidel. A woman called Cristina and her two daughters rented the downstairs. Morales rang Nada's parents twice briefly. On one call, Nada was able to tell her panicked mother that her passport had gone. On the other, she blurted out an urgent request. Could she please tell her teacher that she had chickenpox? That way, the school would not strike her off its books. One night she dreamed that Morales was on top of her, and when she awoke, she found his hands on her thighs. Nada screamed and rushed to the window, hoping that someone might hear her cries for help. Nada was tall for her age, about the same height as Morales, but he was stronger and dragged her back. Today she recalls it as the worst night of my life. Over the next few weeks, during the day Nada would skip rope with Christina's daughters and borrow their Barbie. At night the abuse continued. Morales never let Nada out of his sight, so when his phone rang a week or two later, she overheard the voice of a Bolivian policeman, demanding that he turn himself in and hand her over to the authorities. Unbeknownst to her, Nada's parents had reported her missing, sparking a police hunt on 2 continents. Yet this call made her life worse. Morales took out his SIM card and smashed the phone. Even a 9-year-old child could see what was happening. He was now a fugitive from justice, and Nada was his captive. The morning after, Morales ordered Nada to grab a few of her things, and shortly after, they boarded a long-distance bus. Morales behaved as if they were Bonnie and Clyde, 2 fugitives who were joyfully on the run together. He also gave her a new name. She was now Evelyn and would pose as his niece. He made her cover her head with headscarves and wear long dresses. Nada told me such stories as if from a distance, like a bemused spectator. I use the logical part of my mind to repress the emotional side, she said. I can tell all this so coolly because I don't feel it. During our conversations, her tone shifted only once, when describing how she had suddenly realized, on the day Morales changed her name, that she was powerless, no longer herself. She cried a few tears, but rapidly pulled herself together, apologizing. After more than 6 hours driving northeast, the bus dropped Nada and Morales near a town called Entre Rios. From there, they hitchhiked to a rural settlement known as Villa Union. Morales used his knack for starting conversations with strangers, then drawing them into his confidence. Within 2 days, he persuaded a farmer, Santos Rodriguez, to employ them, and they moved into his house, with his wife and 2 daughters. The next morning Nada was given a machete. She should have been starting back at school in El Hospitalet. Instead, she began working from dawn to dusk, clearing fields, weeding pineapple crops, and hacking at the encroaching forest. She washed their clothes in a creek. When Morales thought she wasn't working hard enough, he beat her with a belt. Morales told Nada they were earning money to pay for her passport. She had always applied herself to schoolwork, and now she did the same to farm laboring. I thought that was my only way out, she told me. Nada learned to fish in the creek, make fire by rubbing sticks together, and deal with snakes. If the snakes were small, the trick was to step on their head, grab their tail, and hurl them away. If they were big, she called Morales or the other farm workers, who hacked at them with machetes. Apart from strength and experience, the men had an additional advantage: boots. Morales had only bought her rubber sandals. On Saturdays, Morales would take her to a place of worship that belonged to a controversial Messianic Andean religion called Iminpu, the Evangelical Association of the Israelite Mission of the Universal Covenant. Founded by a former Peruvian shoemaker, this fiercely conservative religion preaches a mishmash of beliefs, fixates on the 10 Commandments, and sees signs of the apocalypse everywhere. One Saturday, Morales groomed himself carefully. Nada remembers watching a ceremony in which he stood on the stage, and a man in a white tunic wafted incense. Words were intoned in Quechua. Men hugged him. Morales looked happy. Nada asked what had happened. "Now you are my wife," he said. He became mean, jealous, and more violent. At night, he raped her. One evening, as she washed in the river, he pushed her head underwater and held it there. He repeated the action 3 times. Another day, she dared question his belief in God. Enraged, he struck her right foot with a machete, opening a hole down to her soul. They doused the wound in gasoline. She still has the scar. In the evenings, Morales made her repeat out loud the 10 Commandments. In the mornings, she had to tell him her dreams, which he would interpret. In her spare time, Nada drew birds, plants, and flowers in her notebook. She labeled them in 3 languages: Spanish, Catalan, and English. It was like schoolwork, which made her feel better. She clung on to her optimism. This would all be over one day, and she could go back to her family and to school. In late December 2013, 4 months into her ordeal, Nada and Morales returned to his brother Fidel's house in Cochabamba. As Nada listened to drunken neighbors celebrate New Year and calendars flipped to 2014, El Tito Jose Miguel Hidalgo of Spain's Civil Guard Police was anxiously awaiting permission to fly to Bolivia. Bolivia. At 45, Hidalgo was a lead detective in the homicide, extortion and kidnapping squad at the Elite Investigative Central Operative Unit (UCO) in Madrid. Nada's case had landed on Hidalgo's desk after her parents went to the Catalan police in the early hours of 5 September and tearfully tried to explain what had happened. In Spain, international investigations must go through a national police force, such as the Civil Guard, so the two forces worked together. The Catalans tracked down Morales' brother Fidel, owner of the Cochabamba house, who also now lived in the Barcelona area. Wiretaps were placed on Nada's parents' phones, and on those of his brother. Nada's parents said they had trusted Morales. They believed that he wanted to dress her in jewels to smuggle back into Spain, but seemed confused. Even today, Nada is not sure whether Morales fooled them, or if they effectively sold her. Maybe both things are possible. They were undocumented immigrants living in the shadows of Spanish society. Her father, who drank, raged and bullied his wife, worked odd jobs for cash. Her mother cleaned houses. They squatted in a repossessed flat, with no running water and electricity stolen from the grid. Water was fetched from a public tap in the cemetery across the road. Nada used to push a shopping trolley there with her mother, to fill plastic bottles. As he investigated the case, Hidalgo's concern for Nada grew. He discovered that Morales had fled to Spain in 2005 using false documents to avoid trial in Bolivia for raping two half-sisters, aged 11 and 14. Worse still, it took 4 months for Hidalgo and a colleague to receive permission to travel, slowed by bureaucracy and fraught relations between a right-wing Spanish government and Bolivia's left-wing president, Evo Morales. On 28 January, Hidalgo and a colleague finally reached Bolivia, and 2 days later, police raided Fidel's house in Cochabamba. When they arrived, they were greeted by Cristina, who informed them that Morales and Nada had left the previous day. "It was like in the movies," said Hidalgo, "when we met recently at the Civil Guard headquarters in Madrid. You get so close, and then they disappear." In Cochabamba, Nada had watched Morales buying more farm tools and realized they were about to move again. He also bought her a guitar and a music book to learn even 2 songs. She was scared of him, so studied diligently. Within a week, she could strum and sing, but Nada hated that guitar. When they departed, on the morning of 29 January 2014, he made her carry it. More precious things, like some earrings her mother gave her, were left behind. As Hidalgo was making his way to Fidel's house in Cochabamba, Morales and Nada were starting a journey deep into the rainforest by bus, taxi and on foot. Inside the forest, the trees grew so tall and dense that it was dark even during the day. Snakes, monkeys, giant ants, and jaguars lurked. It took almost an hour to wade through chest-high water across one river. They eventually met a tall man dressed in black, wearing high boots. Nada noticed that Morales was deferential to him, and treated her well in his presence. The man led them to their final destination, a coca-cultivating village high in the steep, verdant Carrasco National Park. Nada was amazed to find herself in what she saw as a dazzlingly beautiful prison. They were in a place where the land rose towards the Andes, and clouds clung to the thick forest. Wooden houses were dotted around a green pasture with a crystal-clear stream. Horses grazed, and trees were laden with fruit. The men here carried guns. The green coca plants stretched out in neat long rows. Apart from that, the village felt remote in both distance and time, like something from the 12th century, Nada recalled. Now she worked full-time in the plantations, picking coca leaves on day wages. It was her job to collect their pay from the farmers they worked for, and she secretly stashed away small sums of money, with the idea of buying herself a ticket home. Aircraft and helicopters occasionally flew overhead. Often, these were transport for the cocaine trade. Police were afraid to come here, and rarely did so. There was no escape. On 13 February 2014, Hidalgo and his colleague flew back to Spain frustrated. They had missed Nada by 24 hours, and now she had disappeared again. The sad truth is that she had already been in the hands of an abuser for 6 months. He recalled. The leads his Bolivian colleagues received over the next few weeks produced no results. Meanwhile, back in La Florida, few people beyond Nada's family knew she had been kidnapped. Her story had been kept out of the media. 3 weeks later, on 2 March, Cristina received a call from Morales. Police were tapping her phone, and listened in. The conversation was mostly in Quechua, but suddenly, they heard a girl start speaking Spanish. It was Nada, asking about the maize she had planted in Cristina's garden. She sounded upset when Cristina said that they had already eaten it. The call at least proved Nada was alive. Cristina's phone showed that Morales had run from a solar-powered public telephone deep in the Yungas de Totora region, an 18-hour hike from the nearest road. A police unit set out on 4 March, prepared to camp overnight and cross 3 large rivers, but a wooden bridge over the last river had been swept away. As they trudged back the next day, Nada turned 10 years old. Hidalgo returned to Bolivia, arriving in Cochabamba on 7 March. Bolivian colleagues warned that the only way to reach her was by helicopter, but local narcos would shoot at any aircraft passing over their fields. They would have to do a deal. Over lunch at a restaurant in Cochabamba, Hidalgo sat down to negotiate with local leader Angel Leon, who held sway over the coca growers, some of whom grow legally, while others produce for the cocaine trade. He took it as a matter of honor, Hidalgo said, who also bought the farmer's 500 kilos of sugar as part of the deal. Leon agreed to instruct his men to capture Morales and hold on to Nada. Police could then fly in, load them up, and immediately fly away. That night, Nada and Morales were in their cabin when they heard men wading across the river. Soon a posse of rifle-carrying farmers appeared at their door, looking menacing in the gloom. Nada hid in a corner, sick with panic. Morales looked even more scared. The men tied Morales' hands together, locked him in a wooden crate, and told Nada to follow them. First, she grabbed her camera, notebook and money. A farmer took her into his family cabin, cradling his gun as he watched over her. She remained terrified. The following morning, an army unit provided 2 helicopters to take Hidalgo and a Bolivian police squad to rescue Nada. They took off at 11 a.m., flying above the thick forest canopy. 25 minutes later, Hidalgo made out a clearing with a few houses. A Bolivian police officer pointed to a girl standing in the field with a bright blue headscarf. Hidalgo knew that for the operation to work, it had to be fast, in and out, without cutting the engines. The pilots at the Chimor Air Base had told him. On the ground, Nada did not understand what was happening. The village was in a state of tension. The men at their cabin doors. The noise of the first helicopter grew louder and louder, until it landed in the field, and a policewoman in a blue uniform ran towards her. "Are you Nada?" Nobody had called her by that name for months. She barely had time to reply when another helicopter landed. A tall man jumped out and asked the same question. It was Hidalgo. Hidalgo noticed that her voice had a marked Bolivian lilt and her skin was blistered with mosquito bites. She began to cry. When they took off a few minutes later, Nada looked down, transfixed by the sight of the lush rainforest from above. The next 10 days went by in a flurry of activity. Nada was flown to Cochabamba, where she was given a bed at a state children's home. There were new clothes, medical checks, interviews with police and prosecutors, outings to see the sights. Nada shared the dormitory with a group of teenage girls, who brushed and styled her long, dark hair daily. No attempt was made to put Nada in contact with her parents, who were now being investigated by public prosecutors for allegedly risking their daughter's life in return for a promised share of Morales' jewelry. Hidalgo consulted his wife, then bought Nada a colorful monster high rucksack. She was delighted. He was impressed by the girl's resilience and intelligence. One of her main concerns was whether she would have to repeat the school year. She was very bright, lively and grasped things really quickly, he told me. She also translated basic Quechua words for him. To her, Hidalgo seemed like the sort of father she had only seen in movies, protective and caring. During the flight back to Spain, Hidalgo noticed that she slipped his uneaten bread roll into her pocket. She was still in survival mode. On 17 March 2014, 7 months after she left Spain, 10-year-old Nada Itrab stepped off a flight at Barcelona airport, dragging her new rucksack behind her and clasping Hidalgo's hand. For a few brief minutes, she was allowed to see her parents, but not alone. "I'd never seen my father cry before," she told me. Then they were led away. Nada was now in charge of the Catalan regional government, which had decided to remove her from her parents. There would be no return home or to the school friends she missed, since she would be placed in institutions away from El Hospitalet. Her ordeal was far from over. Newspapers and television programs ran jubilant reports of her return. They had only found out about Nada after her rescue in the jungle. Police gave a press conference, saying Nada was well but offering only vague details about what had happened, and that was it. Apart from the news, in October, that Morales had been handed a 17-year prison sentence for child trafficking and sexual abuse, and 2 years later, that her parents received 2-year suspended sentences for abandoning their child, the story seemed to be over. In late 2022, News Sala, a seasoned Catalan broadcast journalist, made one of her regular visits to the Civil Guard Police's headquarters in Madrid. While there, she spoke to Hidalgo, whom she had known for more than 3 decades. After leading some of Spain's most famous murder and kidnapping investigations, Hidalgo is now a commandant and helps manage the Civil Guard's 700-strong UCO unit from an area office at its Madrid headquarters, where, when I visited late last year, a photo of Nada sits on a bookshelf. In his conversation with Sala, he recalled Nada's rescue as a career highlight. The girl was now 18. They realized what had happened to her. Sala was determined to find out. Nada Itrab was easy to find. Local news sites had reported that a girl with that name had recently won a Euro 500 prize for the best senior year school essay in El Hospitalet. Curiously, the reports did not mention she was the same girl kidnapped a decade earlier. Nada, who was now studying business at a local university, also advertised online as a tutor. Sala wrote to her, saying that she knew Hidalgo well and they both wanted to find out how she was. Might they meet? Nada told me her instinctive reaction was no. She did not want to hash over her past, especially with a journalist. The Bolivia affair was a distant, shameful secret, something she had deliberately erased, but the mention of Hidalgo intrigued her. A month passed before she agreed to meet. By coincidence, Sala had also grown up in El Hospitalet. In fact, they later discovered they had both lived as children children in the same apartment block, opposite the Barcelona Regional Metro's Can Vidal station. They arranged to meet at the station at midday on 27 November 2022. Sala waited in the winter sun with her small black lurcher dog, Piston. When Nada arrived, Sala was struck by a calm and dignified stylishness. She wore a blue overcoat, was immaculately made up, and had her thick black hair twisted in a braid that hung below her waist. In fact, Nada was a bundle of nerves at the thought of revisiting a deeply buried trauma, but she had learned to hide such feelings. As Nada laid out the story of her life since her return to Spain, Sala listened aghast. Catalan authorities had placed her in 2 different children's homes, where, initially, Hidalgo visited from time to time in towns outside Barcelona until she was 14, and then returned Nada to her parents' squat. Despite their declared guilt in the Bolivia fiasco, 4 years later, Nada still lived there. Returning to La Florida had been a ghastly experience, though she had been desperate to leave the nuns, who ran the last of the 2 children's homes. She lived in fear of her father's temper, going to bed early without eating just to avoid him. She kept a knife under her pillow. At the local Rubio Iors High School, Nada's teachers saw her crumbling as she struggled at home and fought to get top grades. She suffered severe anxiety attacks, hunger, scarcity, abuse, domestic chaos, and anxiety drove her deep into depression. She ran away from home aged 15, sleeping on apartment block rooftops and staircases for a week. She contemplated suicide aged 16, walking around their tiny living room with a knife in her hand for an hour or so. She conjured up a small light in her mind, which enabled her to let go of the knife. It represented hope for the future, she said. Once more, her salvation was school. Alba Solsona, the history and geography teacher who oversaw her prize-winning essay on Palestine, a subject they both felt passionately about, told me Nada always stood out as curious, competitive and driven. She was more serious than other adolescents and, set on getting good grades, found it hard to make friends. Teachers were told Nada came from an extremely vulnerable background but knew no other details. At home, Nada read assiduously. In class, she was a tenacious debater. As a teacher, she forced you to be at your best, Solsona said. As they grew closer, working on the research project, Solsona occasionally suggested there was more to life than good grades, but Nada was clear this was the route out of La Florida. After meeting at Can Vidal at Metro Station on 27 November 2022, Nada and Sala continued their conversation over a shared plate of patatas con alioli in the winter sunshine outside a nearby bar, Juanito's. For Nada, the meeting was revelatory. She had barely talked about Bolivia since she first returned, and had come to frame it less as a kidnapping by an abusive pedophile than as a holiday that went wrong. As she and Sala talked, the truth began to come into focus. Tell me my story, she begged Sala. Sala was wary of provoking fresh trauma. I'm not a psychologist, she told me. Nevertheless, she sketched out how Nada had been kidnapped, enslaved and then rescued. Sala, who had spent her career reporting harrowing stories from around the world, was amazed by the poise and resilience of the woman in front of her. She was a survivor, Sala told me. She was also indignant that the Catalan government had never formalized Nada's residency status, even though she had lived in Spain since she was 4 and, as a victim of people trafficking, automatically qualified for permanent residency. Instead, as an undocumented Moroccan immigrant, Nada was not permitted to work, nor could she apply for student grants. When Sala offered to help, starting by ensuring she gained legal residency, Nada was unsure how to respond. A month after their first meeting, in late December 2022, she went to Sala's house in Barcelona, with a surprising request. She didn't just want help, Nada explained. She had heroines, whose lives she studied, and books she read. Young women like Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani education activist shot in the head by radical Islamists in 2012, and the Yazidi woman Nadia Murad, who had been enslaved by ISIS in Iraq when she was 21. These women had used their suffering to campaign. Nada wanted to do the same. I want my story to make abused and enslaved children visible, she announced. Together, over the months that followed, they hatched a plan. Nada would learn to tell her story in public, and together they would work on a book and a documentary. With Sala's help, Nada had her residency approved. Nada also switched her university course to law and international relations, to better prepare her for a life of advocacy. Yet even as she forged ahead, Nada was haunted by terrible nightmares of violent men chasing her through forests or threatening urban landscapes. Sala found Nada a psychologist and took her to an animal therapy center run by a friend, where Nada spent time with horses. One day, the owner asked Nada to speak with a group of executives who had arrived for a course. For the first time, she told her story to strangers. Nada was bemused to see them weep. Soon, Sala ceased to think of Nada as the protagonist in a story that she would cover as a journalist. She thought of her, as she told me, like a second daughter. The relationship filled an emotional need for Sala, now 56. After 3 decades of reporting on victims of crime and catastrophe, it has become an all-consuming, emotionally exhausting and, so far, financially draining project. I've told a lot of stories of hardship and seen young girls die, Sala told me. If I can help just one of them make it, then it will be worth the effort. Through all this, Nada continued living with her family in Florida, even though her father's frightening rages and the evictions from their squatted apartments continued. Though Sala was convinced that her family were, in fact, the greatest danger to Nada's future, Nada wanted to support her mother and be present for her two younger brothers. There was another reason for not leaving home. Nada had discovered religion while at school. Aged 16, she had watched TikTok videos of people reciting the Quran, which had soothed her anxieties. Her parents were not religious, but she began reading the Quran and hadiths, the sayings and deeds of Muhammad, finding lessons about forgiveness, love and peace. The trick, she said, was to answer evil with goodness. In her mind, that meant pardoning her parents and even morals. Strangely, her encounter with him had not put her off religion. My first contact with God was when I asked how someone like him could claim to believe in God, and that was the day he stabbed me through the foot, she said. Early in 2024, Sala found a women's refuge that offered a small studio flat in a town outside Barcelona, but Nada worried that this contravened an Islamic duty to her family. One day that summer, after visiting a contemporary art museum in Barcelona, she wandered into the Santa Maria del Mar Basilica, a soaring 14th century Gothic building. A Roman Catholic priest was standing near the altar, inviting people to confess. She decided to ask for his help. Perhaps he could advise her. In the confession box, once more, she discovered the power of her story. As she spoke, the priest wept in great, gulping sobs. I've never seen anyone cry like that, she said. He was really suffering. When the priest recovered, he advised Nada to move out. You need to escape and start a new life. When police turned up at the family's squat to evict them in November 2024, she finally accepted the offer of the studio. When Nada moved in, she felt joyful and free. It was the first time she had experienced domestic peace, and only she had the key. There was another pull on her attention. Her mother had found her a job as the receptionist in a block of self-catering apartments popular with wealthy Eastern European and Russian mafia members. The men loved her. One took her shopping and to exclusive restaurants. Sala and Nada argued about whether she should ever accept anything from them. Eventually, Nada tired of these men's attention. When they see you are poor, they think they have power, she told me. If Nada had felt tempted by luxury, it wasn't just because that was the opposite of poverty, but also because the plan with Sala seemed to be stalling. Nobody wanted their documentary, or not with the campaigning seriousness they insisted it should have. Publishers shrugged at their book proposal. If she had been white and not Moroccan, things would have been different, said Sala. By now, Nada was heavily invested in the project. With Sala's encouragement, she switched to law and international relations. This fitted her new aims and was more fulfilling, but was riskier in terms of future employment. What if the plan didn't work? With no family safety net, failure could still mean a squat in Florida. Since Sala's old media contacts didn't seem interested, Nada went directly to Yuri Sabat, one of Spain's best-known YouTubers. When Sala found out, she was furious that Nada had blown the exclusivity of her personal story, fearing that it had hurt the chances of landing the documentary or publishing deal that was meant to set her up to finish her studies and give her independence. They did not speak for a month. Once they had patched up their differences, Sala steered Nada onto popular mainstream morning television talk shows. On the first of these appearances, on Antena 3 in early September 2025, Nada told her story, explaining that she forgave Morales, who had by now died in jail. When you forgive, you don't do it because the other person deserves it, she explained. I do this because my heart deserves to live free of rancor. The studio audience applauded enthusiastically. Since they were in Madrid, Sala took Nada to see Hidalgo. The entire UCO headquarters seemed thrilled by her visit, and Nada discovered that her case was legendary. Several artifacts recovered with her, a pocket Quran and notebook kept by Morales, had long been displayed in a glass cabinet. It was a special case from the very start, Hidalgo told me. Any other child would have died, but she is a chameleon. She can adapt to anything. Seeing her again was an emotional high. It was the same Nada, so very bright and quick, he said. Nada had a lump in her throat, as she tried not to cry. I could see how much my life had meant to them, she said. Hidalgo invited her to come back and help him train agents dealing with trafficking victims. On 14 September 2025, Barcelona's La Vanguardia newspaper ran a story about their reunion and told of Nada's double tragedy. First the kidnapping, then her abandonment by the Catalan authorities. The article brought their project back to life. Suddenly, publishers and television producers wanted to talk. A few days later, I began traveling regularly to Barcelona from my home in Madrid to meet Nada. I was curious about her backstory, her ambition, and her relationship with Sala. We spoke for hours, sitting across the small dinner table at Sala's house, a two-story home tucked down a private alley close to the Park Güell with its outlandish gaudy decorations. Conversations were often three-way affairs, with Sala present. Nada felt at home here, nipping into the kitchen to make herself hot chocolate. Their bond had been strengthened by the up-and-down nature of their project, including disagreements. Sala was straight-talking and loving, fretting about Nada's eating or chastising her for overdressing for television appearances. You can't turn up looking like Angelina Jolie. Nada shrugged. She always arrived immaculately dressed and made up. Her calm and candid eloquence hid a fidgety energy. To begin with, she toyed with anything on the table, including my tape recorder. These conversations became like watching a box being slowly opened. Nada was excavating her own past, reading police and court documents for more details about what happened to her, preparing to sue the Catalan government for Euro 300,000 for negligence from an intern placement at a law firm in Barcelona, and digging up memories with the help of psychologists. She was filling huge gaps in her life, while trying to understand them. She struggled, especially, to work out her parents, whom she did not want to discuss. In some ways, things were happening too quickly. During this time, she appeared on more TV shows, her polished presence and moderate tone contrasting with the horrors of her story. The American Spanish-language channel Univision broadcast a report on her. By now, she was receiving 3 emails a week from abused girls and young women around the world, including some from the Iminpu cult. Nada wrote back, or had video chats with them, though she could do little more than listen and express sympathy. At the same time, she was studying for her law degree, writing her book with Sala, interning at the law firm, and preparing her claim against the Catalan government. By December, she was exhausted, and clumps of hair began falling out. She was determined to tough it out, but her body was betraying her. On a sunny winter morning, we drove in Sala's utilitarian grey Toyota Pro's van, with her dog Piston, to La Florida and walked around the cemetery where Nada used to fill water bottles. For Sala, whose father is buried here, this was a first. Nada always asked to stay away from her parents' Mario when they met. Even now, Nada fretted about bumping into her father, since her parents were angry about her television appearances. By January, when she had used the book advance to buy her family furniture, their attitude had softened. They now realize that I will inevitably tell my story, and have changed, she said. We visited the rundown block where Morales had been their neighbor and wandered past the apartment with broken windows where her family now squats. As we walked, Nada declared that La Florida would be one of her causes, too. I'm proud of this place, she said. She recalled the delinquency, drugs and fights. One year, youth torched the Christmas tree in the main plaza, but also remembers it as a neighborly place, full of life. As we drove away from La Florida, Nada told me her dream was to speak to the UN about the need to fight child trafficking. This determination has a cost. The last time we met, at the end of January, Nada was going through a punishing, intensive round of therapy to overcome her dissociation from what has happened to her. Some of the pain locked away more than a decade ago was now beginning to show. It was like removing a mask, she said, and very scary. I consider myself strong, she told me. So, if I'm suffering, imagine what it's like for someone who doesn't have the things I now have. Nada's way of coping involves throwing herself harder into her fight. In a recent WhatsApp message, she told me that she had a letter ready for the well-known human rights barrister Amal Clooney, who has represented Nadia Murad, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, like Nada's other heroine, Malala Yousafzai. I want to ask her advice. Nada said she was going to send it once this article was published. Knowing Nada, it will be on its way tomorrow. The Guardian. 7. Mitra Jyothi News January, March 2026. The National Federation of the Blind, NFB, commemorated World Braille Day along with the 21st anniversary of NFB Karnataka at the Karnataka Small Scale Industries Association, Kasha, Bengaluru on 5th January 2026, celebrating the role of Braille in empowering persons with visual impairment. The program featured competitions, an awareness talk on general health, interactive sessions with distinguished guests, and felicitation of eminent personalities. Various awards were also presented to recognize excellence, talent, community service, and self-empowerment within the visually impaired community. The event was attended by MS Madhu Singhal, Vice President of NFB, Smiles, Care and Healthy Habits, Dr. Gurdeep Kaur Chauhan, and her wonderful team from Hyrax Dental Multi-Specialty Clinic, HSR, Bangalore led a dental health camp on 23rd January at Mitra Jyothi. The session began with an engaging talk on dental health and oral hygiene, helping our students understand the importance of caring for their smiles. This was followed by individual dental checkups for every student, ensuring personal attention and care. To make it even more special, the team distributed toothbrushes and toothpaste, a thoughtful gesture that truly made a difference. Mitra Jyothi students walked away not just with brighter smiles, but with greater awareness and confidence about their health in general. It was a proud and inspiring moment for Mitra Jyothi student Geetanjali as she successfully completed the 25 km run at Pinkathon Bengaluru 2026, India's biggest women's run, held on 24th January. The event witnessed thousands of women coming together to celebrate sisterhood, strength, and community, turning the morning into a powerful movement of joy and shared purpose. Geetanjali also had the wonderful opportunity to meet Milind Soman, actor and fitness icon, which made the experience even more special. On 31st January 2026, Mr. Danish Mahajan, who is from Pathankot, Punjab and the founder of Radio Udon, along with his wife Shilpa and representatives from other organizations, MS Anubha Singhal, co-founder of Enable Me Access and Visual Design Collaboratives, and Mr. Sunil Chaudhary, founder of the Accessible Nation app, visited Mitra Jyothi. Mr. Gautamagal also joined them. Mitra Jyothi team took them around Mitra Jyothi, and they interacted with the students. The Accessible Nation (TAN) app is an accessibility-first online shopping platform designed to make digital commerce inclusive and barrier-free for everyone, including persons with disabilities. It focuses on creating a personalized and accessible shopping experience by adapting to each user's needs. From 4th February 2026, yoga begins at Mitra Jyothi. Weekly yoga classes have started at Mitra Jyothi, specially designed for our visually impaired students. This initiative focuses on improving physical health, balance, mindfulness, and overall well-being. Mitra Jyothi is deeply grateful to a volunteer, Mrs. Pallavi, a dedicated yoga practitioner with over 10 years of experience and certification from the Atmadarshan Yoga Ashram. For her, yoga is more than a science, it is a holistic science that nurtures harmony between body, mind, people, and nature. Her mission is simple yet powerful: to make yoga accessible to all, especially the elderly and persons with special needs, enabling them to experience its profound physical and mental benefits. On 7th February, Mitra Jyothi successfully concluded its accessibility testing course with a heartwarming valedictory ceremony. It has been an incredible journey, and Mitra Jyothi is proud to award certificates to the 6 dedicated students, who are now ready to contribute towards making the digital world more inclusive. The ceremony was graced by the chief guest, Ms. Aishwarya, and our special guests, Mr. Rakesh and Mr. Hari. Ms. Aishwarya is the co-founder, CMO, and product lead at Braille Maker Innovations, where she leads the development of SpaceFelt, a smartphone application that works with QR labels to make public spaces more accessible for people with visual impairments. Mitra Jyothi extended heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Hari, who supported the entire course as a volunteer. His unwavering commitment, constant encouragement, and valuable guidance were a pillar of strength for both the organizers and the students throughout the program. Some days leave a lasting imprint on the heart, and March 6th was one of them. Mitra Jyothi is deeply grateful to Electrobit for their thoughtful and generous donation of assistive devices for Mitra Jyothi's visually impaired community. What made this gesture truly special was not just the support, but the presence and warmth the team brought with them. As each device was placed into the hands of a beneficiary, it wasn't just a tool being given, it was confidence, independence, and possibility being passed on. The Electrobit team spent time connecting with the students, understanding their journeys, and walking through Mitra Jyothi, making the day deeply personal and meaningful. Moments like these remind Mitra Jyothi that true inclusion is built through human connection. 12th March was a day filled with innocence, curiosity, and beautiful beginnings. Mitra Jyothi had the joy of welcoming 10 little 5-year-olds from Bachpan Play School, HSR layout, their first ever interaction with persons with visual impairment. Their questions were pure, their curiosity endless. How do you see? How do you play? And in those moments, learning truly came alive. Through simple experiences, they discovered that one can see through sound, touch, and feeling. They explored Braille, just 6 tiny dots opening up a whole new world. They played snakes and ladders, and even experienced a cricket ball with jingles, giggling, learning, and connecting all at once. What stood out was not just what they learned, but how naturally they embraced it. Mitra Jyothi truly appreciates Bachpan Play School for believing in education beyond the classroom, because when children learn inclusion this young, they don't just grow up informed, they grow up kind and responsible. On March 28, 2026, Mitra Jyothi marked another beautiful milestone filled with joy, pride, and inspiration. The day brought together students, volunteers, supporters, and well-wishers who have been part of this meaningful journey toward empowering the visually impaired community. Mitra Jyothi was deeply honored to welcome the chief guest, Ms. Kavya NR, a proud player of the Indian women's blind cricket team and a long-time representative of the Karnataka state team. Her presence truly inspired everyone in the room. One of the most special moments of the celebration was the felicitation of Mitra Jyothi achievers and dedicated volunteers. Their commitment continues to remind why this mission matters every single day. The event also celebrated the success of the 63rd batch of digital literacy students. Each certificate symbolized confidence, independence, and a step toward a brighter future in the digital world. The celebrations became even more memorable with a soulful violin performance by Mr. Nibin Matthew, stunning dance performances by our talented students Sandini and Kavya, and a singing performance by Ms. Pramila Shind, a perfect reflection of creativity, talent, and determination. Mitra Jyothi thanked its trustees, sponsors, volunteers, and supporters who continue to stand by the organization. 8. Recipe: simple protein peanut salad. Ingredients: serves 2. A. 1 cup boiled chickpeas or boiled black chana. B. A half cup boiled moon sprouts, optional, for extra protein. C. 1 small cucumber, chopped. D. 1 medium tomato, chopped. E. 1 small onion, finely chopped. F. 2 3 TBSP roasted peanuts. G. 2 TBSP chopped coriander leaves. H. 1 green chili, finely chopped, optional. I. Juice of 1 lemon. J. Salt to taste. K. A half tsp roasted cumin powder. L. A quarter tsp black pepper or red chili powder. Method 1. Add the boiled chickpeas, sprouts, cucumber, tomato, onion, and roasted peanuts to a large bowl. 2. Sprinkle in the salt, roasted cumin powder, and black pepper or chili powder. 3. Add the lemon juice and mix everything well. 4. Garnish with chopped coriander leaves. 5. Serve immediately. Protein content approximate. A. 1 cup boiled chickpeas, 14-15 g. B. A half cup boiled moon sprouts, 3-4 g. C. 2-3 TBSP roasted peanuts, 4-6 g. Total. Approximately 21-25 g of protein per serving, depending on the exact quantities used. Optional additions. A. 50-100 g paneer for an extra 9-18 g of protein. B. 2 boiled eggs for an extra 12 g of protein. C. A handful of pomegranate seeds for sweetness and crunch. This salad makes a great breakfast, evening snack, or light dinner and takes about 10-15 minutes to prepare if the chickpeas and sprouts are already boiled. 9. Radio Udon News. Article 1. Buddy Up Network, a friendship app built for inclusion. Loneliness is something many persons with disabilities know well. Even in a connected world, finding friends who understand your day-to-day experiences can feel difficult. A new app from India is trying to change that. Buddy Up Network is an inclusive social networking app that helps persons with disabilities and their caregivers find friendship, community, and meaningful connection. It was launched in 2024 by two mothers from Mumbai, Monisha Gandhi and Gopika Kapur. The idea grew out of their own lives. Monisha's son Mihan has Down syndrome and Gopika's son Ver has autism. When the two boys met, they formed an instant bond. Watching this friendship blossom, the two mothers realized how rare such connections can be for young people with disabilities, and they decided to build a space where these bonds could happen for everyone. The app is designed to be safe, simple, and accessible. It is open to persons with disabilities above the age of 18, as well as their parents, guardians, and caregivers. Users can search for friends based on location, interests, age, gender, and disability. Those who do not wish to share their disability can simply leave that field blank, and personal details such as phone number and address can be kept private. Buddy Up offers detailed profiles so members can learn about a person before starting a conversation. It includes in-app chat and video calling, so users can connect without having to share personal contact details. Caregivers can use the app to help find friends for the persons they support, and they can also connect with other caregivers who have walked a similar path. The app provides trusted resources and information on credible disability organizations, and it includes a disability glossary. For readers who use screen readers, there is good news. The app has been reviewed as fully accessible with voiceover, with clearly labeled buttons and easy navigation. It is available on both Android and iOS, in English and Hindi. The founders have said they continue to improve voice features and accessibility based on feedback from blind and low vision users. Importantly, this is not only a dating app. Users can choose whether they are looking for friendship, companionship, or both. The expected outcome of an app like this is powerful. The World Health Organization has called loneliness a global public health concern, and persons with disabilities often experience social isolation at higher rates than others. A platform that lets people connect on their own terms, in a safe and respectful space, can reduce that isolation, build confidence, and create lasting friendships. For families and caregivers, it offers reassurance and a sense of community. Buddy Up Network is a reminder that everyone deserves the chance to find their people. Article 2. A Kannada Disability News Bulletin from Radio Udon and Mitra Jyothi. Access to news in one's own language is something many people take for granted. For persons with disabilities, and especially for the Kannada-speaking community, news that is both accessible and focused on disability matters has often been hard to find. A new collaboration is working to fill this gap. Radio Udon, in collaboration with Mitra Jyothi, has launched a weekly disability news bulletin in the Kannada language. The bulletin brings together news, updates, and information that matter to the disability community, presented in Kannada so that it reaches listeners in a language they know and love. It will be aired every Sunday on Radio Udon's YouTube channel, as well as across its other social media platforms, so that listeners can tune in easily from wherever they are. This partnership joins the strengths of two trusted organizations. Radio Udon is an online community radio platform working for inclusion and empowerment, with a wide reach across India and beyond. Mitra Jyothi is a well-respected organization based in Karnataka that has long served the blind and disability community. Together, they bring credibility, regional understanding, and a shared commitment to accessibility. The bulletin is designed to keep the Kannada-speaking disability community informed about important developments, including news on rights, schemes, events, and stories of achievement. By choosing the audio and video format and sharing it on widely used platforms, the program makes sure that persons with visual impairment and other disabilities can access the content with ease. The expected outcome of this bulletin is meaningful inclusion. When news is shared in a regional language, It reaches people who are often left out of mainstream, English-dominated media. Listeners stay informed about their rights and the opportunities available to them. The disability community gains a regular, reliable voice that speaks directly to them. Over time, a weekly bulletin like this can build awareness, encourage participation, and strengthen the sense that the Canada-speaking disability community is seen, heard, and valued. It is a fine example of how collaboration and regional language media can carry the message of inclusion to every corner. This learning material is distributed free of cost under the Project of Financial Support for Development of Accessible Learning Materials under SIPDA Scheme for Implementation of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, DEPUD, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, Govt. of India, Nodal Agency, National Institute for the Empowerment of the Persons with Visual Disabilities, NEPD, Dehradun.